I jolted upright, heart racing, the echo of his voice still haunting my dreams. But that was impossible. He was dead, had been for 3 days. Yet there it was, his name flickering on my screen. Aiden Calloway. My hand trembled as I picked it up, cold sweat slick on my skin. I pressed accept, bringing the phone to my ear. Silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Then a whisper, raspy, hollow, unmistakable. They lied. It wasn't suicide. My chest tightened, breath hitching. As the call disconnected, I stared at the screen, the digital clock taunting me. 12:01 a.m. The room felt colder. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching ominously. Aiden had been my best friend. We grew up together, fought together, bled together. I was the one who found him, dangling from that old oak tree, his face swollen and lifeless. They ruled it a suicide. But I knew him better than that. Aiden would never have given up. Not like that. I stumbled to my desk, fumbling through old papers and half-finished manuscripts. I needed proof. Something to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The police report was buried beneath my notes, a bland, official document declaring him emotionally distressed with no evidence of foul play. I snorted. They didn't know Aiden, but I did. His last message to me was brief, cryptic. Meet me by the tree, midnight, urgent. I was late, 20 minutes. If I had been faster. My phone vibrated again, nearly slipping from my sweaty palm. A text message. My stomach lurched as I opened it. It was from his number. They're watching. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself. The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. This was madness, some sick joke. I dialed his number, fingers clumsy, heart thundering. 3 rings. 4. Voicemail. His voice played back, cheerful, alive. Hey, it's Aiden. Leave a message or don't. I don't really care, later, loser. My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, head spinning. How was his phone still active? How did he? A loud thud shattered my thoughts. It came from outside near the tree. I crawled to the window, pushing the curtain aside. There it was, the oak tree, skeletal against the moonlit sky. But something dangled from one of its branches, twisting slowly in the breeze. I squinted, heart freezing as the shape came into focus. A noose. Freshly tied, swaying gently, as if inviting me. The phone buzzed once more. Another message. Come closer. See what they did to me. My hands were ice, my legs refused to move. But my eyes were glued to that tree, the noose, the haunting echo of his voice. He was dead. I knew that. I saw his body, pale and cold. But if he was truly gone, who was texting me now? My name is Ezra Whitlock, and I don't believe in ghosts. But I do believe in revenge. I grew up in the shadow of Aiden Calloway. He was the golden boy, captain of the soccer team, straight-A student, everyone's favorite. And me? I was his shadow, the sidekick, the one they never remembered. But Aiden never treated me that way. To him, I was more than just a side character in his story. I was his brother. Not by blood, but by choice. We met when we were 6. I was the scrawny kid with hand-me-down clothes, living in the crumbling house at the end of Maple Street. Aiden was the kid everyone wanted to be, charming, rich, and fearless. but he never cared about the differences between us. He stood up for me when no one else would. And from that day on, we were inseparable. We were two halves of the same soul, bonded by shared secrets and wild adventures. We built forts in the woods, sneaked out past curfew, and made a pact under that cursed oak tree. Brothers forever. No matter what, I still remember the way his eyes gleamed that night, the mischievous grin on his face as he held out his pinky. Swear it, Ez. Even when we're old and gray, you'll always have my back. I laughed, locking my pinky with his. Always, Calloway, always. We were kids then, naive, invincible. We didn't know what the world would do to us, what it would do to him. Aiden was always the stronger one, the protector. But behind that charismatic smile, he was fragile. I saw it, those fleeting moments when his laughter faltered. His eyes darkened, but he never talked about it, not even to me. And then he started receiving those messages. Anonymous, threatening, taunting. They appeared on his locker, his car, his phone. I know what you did. You can't hide forever. I asked him about them once, but he just shrugged it off. Prank says, someone's just messing with me. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The light in his eyes dimmed. The shadows grew longer. He started drinking more, staying out later, avoiding me. I was losing him, and I didn't know how to save him. 3 days ago, they found him hanging from that tree, our tree. They called it suicide. Said he was struggling with pressure, with expectations. They didn't know him like I did. He was strong. He was a fighter. He wouldn't have given up. But then, that message. They lied. It wasn't suicide. I wanted to believe it was a cruel joke. Some twisted prank by someone who didn't know how much Aiden meant to me. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. Why would he go to that tree? Why didn't he leave a note? Why would he call me after he was already dead? I was the last person he reached out to, and I failed him. I was late. 20 minutes. That's all it took. 20 minutes that haunted me every night, the guilt suffocating, relentless. I should have been there. I should have saved him. But if that message was true, if he didn't take his own life, then someone killed him, and they were still out there, laughing, taunting, watching me. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in justice. And whoever did this was about to find out just how far I was willing to go to get it. The morning after the call, I went to Aiden's house. His parents were shattered, hollowed-out versions of themselves. Mrs. Calloway sat on the couch, staring blankly at the same photo she'd been holding at the funeral. Aiden's graduation picture, all smiles and promise. Mr. Calloway barely looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had finally crushed him. But I needed answers. I forced myself to speak, my voice breaking. Did he ever say anything to you? Anything strange before that night? Mrs. Calloway blinked, her eyes shifting to me as if seeing me for the first time. She shook her head, her lips quivering. He was just tired, exhausted. I thought it was school, the pressure to be perfect. I should have known. Her voice broke, a sob escaping. I should have been there for him. I looked away, guilt clawing at me. We were all blaming ourselves. all trying to make sense of the senseless, but I couldn't leave without the truth. Did anyone visit him? Or call him that night? She looked puzzled. No, I don't think so. He was in his room. He said he was working on a project. When I went to check on him, he was gone. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down. He didn't even say goodbye. I couldn't breathe. If Aiden left the house that night, it meant someone called him out. There, someone he trusted enough to follow. Did you get his phone back? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. Calloway looked up, his face hardening. The police have it. Evidence, they said. But they won't find anything. Aiden wasn't involved in anything bad. My boy was good. I wanted to believe that too. But then who was sending those messages? Who was playing this cruel game? I left the house with more questions than answers. The sun was high, bright and blinding, a stark contrast to the darkness inside me. My phone vibrated. Another message. You're looking in the wrong place. Ask the ones who loved him the most. I spun around, heart racing. Was someone watching me? I scanned the street, but it was empty, eerily still. My skin crawled, paranoia setting in. I could feel eyes on me, cold and calculating. I glanced at the message again, a chill running down my spine. The ones who loved him the most, I knew. Who I needed to see. You think Aiden was murdered? Delilah McKay stared at me, her green eyes wide, disbelief etched across her delicate features. She was Aiden's girlfriend. Homecoming queen, cheer captain, perfect in every way. Aiden adored her, we all did. I nodded, my jaw tight. He called me last night, Dee, from his phone. I heard his voice. He said it wasn't suicide. Her face paled, her hands trembling as she clutched the pendant around her neck. The one Aiden gave her on their 1-year anniversary. That's not possible. I was with him that night, Ezra. We had dinner, we talked. He was fine, happy even. He told me he loved me. Her voice broke, her eyes brimming with tears. If something was wrong, he would have told me, right? I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But how could I, when nothing made sense? I looked away, the weight of guilt pressing down. Did he say anything? Unusual, anything at all? She shook her head, wiping her tears. No, but he did get a call. Right before he left. He looked worried. I asked him about it, but he brushed it off. Said it was just someone from school. My heart sank. Did you see who called him? She hesitated, her face crumpling. No, but I saw the name once before. He was texting someone a lot. He got so secretive, like he was hiding something. I asked him, but he got defensive. I didn't push him. I should have pushed him. I grabbed her hand, my voice urgent. Delilah, who was he texting? She looked up at me, eyes full of fear. It was saved as X. Just one letter, X. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Who the hell was X? And why was Aiden keeping the secret? Delilah looked at me, her voice trembling. Ezra, do you think someone hurt him? Do you think someone killed him? I couldn't answer. But deep down I already knew the truth. Someone did this to him. And they were playing with me next. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice, broken, haunted, pleading. They lied. It wasn't suicide. The words echoed, twisting through my mind, clawing at my sanity. Was it really Aiden? Or was grief making me hear things that weren't there? I sat on the edge of my bed, head in my hands, struggling to breathe. It felt like drowning, like being buried alive. I missed him. God, I missed him. The world was colder without him, emptier. My phone sat beside me, taunting me with that final message. They're watching. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself. What did that mean? Who was watching? Why couldn't I trust myself? Paranoia crept in, insidious and relentless. I stared at the shadows on my wall, waiting for them to move, to shift into something monstrous. I was losing my mind, or maybe someone wanted me to feel that way. I stood up, pacing the room, my thoughts spiraling. Who was X? Why was Aiden hiding their identity? Was X the one who called him that night, the one who led him to the tree? Or worse, was X the one who killed him? My skin prickled, fear crawling up my spine. If X did this, then they knew I was looking for them. They knew I was getting closer, and they were warning me. A knock at my window shattered my thoughts. I whipped around, heart hammering. Nothing. Just the wind howling through the trees. I exhaled, body trembling, trying to convince myself I was safe. The phone buzzed. Another message. Stop digging, Ezra. You won't like what you find. My blood ran cold. They knew my name. They were watching me. My hands shook as I dropped the phone, stumbling back. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like a bug under a microscope. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and ran. Down the stairs, out the door, into the night. The cold air stung my skin, the darkness swallowing me. But I kept running, my feet pounding against the pavement, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the tree. The cursed tree where I found him, swaying lifelessly in the wind. It loomed above me, branches stretching out like skeletal fingers, reaching for the sky. The noose was gone, cut down by the police. But I could still see it, still hear the creaking of the rope, the haunting whisper of his voice. I sank to my knees, hands digging into the cold earth, tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry, Aiden. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have saved you. But my apologies were swallowed by the wind, unanswered. He was gone, and I was alone. I sat there shivering, lost. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who was lying. I didn't even know if I could trust myself. The phone buzzed again, and my heart sank. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to read the next taunt, the next threat. But my hand moved on its own, reaching into my pocket. Pulling out the phone, one new message. But this one wasn't from a blocked number. It was from Aiden's. You're closer than you think. Don't give up on me. My breath caught, hope igniting in my chest. Was it really him? Was he reaching out from beyond the grave? Or was someone playing a sick, twisted game? I didn't know what to believe. But I couldn't stop now. I wouldn't stop. Aiden needed me, even if he was gone. Whoever X was, whatever secrets they were hiding, I was going to find them, even if it killed me. I stood in front of the school staring at the graffiti on Aiden's locker. The janitor hadn't bothered to clean it, probably out of respect, or maybe fear. Murderer. The word was jagged, angry, smeared in red spray paint that looked too much like blood. It was a cruel, senseless thing to do. But then again, so was killing Aiden. I felt eyes on me, whispers floating through the hallway. They were all watching, all wondering if I was losing it. Maybe I was. But I wasn't the only one. You need to let this go, Ezra. I spun around to see Coach Fletcher, his arms crossed, his face grim. He was Aiden's mentor, the father figure he looked up to. I used to envy their bond. Now, I just felt cold. Did you know? I asked, my voice hollow. Did you know he was getting threats? Coach's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. I knew he was stressed, but Aiden kept his cards close, even from me. He looked at the locker, his shoulders sagging. Whatever's haunting, you kid, let it go. Aiden's gone, you can't bring him back. I looked away, anger bubbling up. I'm not trying to bring him back, I'm trying to find out who killed him. Coach's eyes snapped to mine, a flash of something, fear, crossing his face before he looked away. The police closed the case. It was suicide, Ezra. Let it rest. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand. But the bell rang and he walked away, leaving me alone with the red accusation scrawled across the locker. Murderer. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message. You're asking the wrong questions. Look closer. The answer was always in front. View? I shivered, unease crawling up my spine. Someone was playing with me, leading me on. But to what? And why? I glanced back at the locker, at the hateful word dripping down the metal. Look closer. I leaned in, my fingers brushing against the paint. It was still wet. Fresh. Whoever did this was here, watching. I turned around, scanning the hallway, but all I saw were faces turned away, eyes avoiding mine. I was surrounded by ghosts, people who once knew me but were now strangers. Except one, Riley. Thompson stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, her lips curled into a smirk. She was Aiden's ex, the one who never got over him choosing Delilah. She watched me with cold eyes, a cruel satisfaction flickering across her face before she turned and walked away. I followed her, my heart pounding. Riley was always around, always watching. She'd been at the funeral, the wake, even outside Aiden's house the night he died. Was she obsessed? Or was it something darker? She slipped into the old theater building, the one that was condemned after the fire last year. I hesitated, fear coiling in my gut. But then I thought of Aiden, of his voice echoing through the phone. They lied. It wasn't suicide. I swallowed my fear and followed her inside. The air was heavy, damp, the faint smell of smoke lingering. The hallway was dark, shadows twisting along the cracked walls. I heard footsteps, soft and deliberate, leading me deeper into the building. Turned a corner and froze. The walls were covered in photos, dozens of them, of Aiden, of Delilah, of me. My blood ran cold as I approached the collage, my eyes wide, my hands trembling. They were all candid shots, at school, at the park, outside our houses. Some were recent. Others were from years ago. Someone had been watching us for a long time. I took a step closer, my eyes scanning the faces. There was Aiden laughing, carefree, unaware of the eyes on him. Delilah smiling at him, her love obvious. And me, always in the background, always looking at them. I felt sick, violated. But then I saw it. In the center of the collage was a single photo, separate from the rest. It was of Aiden and Delilah, their faces close, laughing. But someone had drawn a red X over Delilah's face. I stumbled back, my heart hammering, my mind spinning. X wasn't a person. It was a threat. I turned around and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty hall. I burst out of the building, gasping for air, my skin crawling. Someone had been following us, stalking us. And Aiden knew. That's why he was scared. That's why he was secretive. Someone was hunting us. And now, they were coming for me. My phone buzzed. Another message. Run, Ezra. It's your turn now. I looked up, my blood turning to ice. Across the street, standing under the street lamp, was a figure. I couldn't see their face, but they were watching me. They lifted their hand, pointing at me, their head tilting. A silent promise. I turned and ran, my lungs burning, my heart pounding. X was real. X was here. And they weren't done yet. The game was just beginning. I ran until my legs burned, until my lungs felt like they would burst. I didn't stop until I reached Delilah's house, pounding on the door, screaming her name. The door flew open, and she stood there, her eyes red, her face pale. Ezra? What's wrong? I pushed past her, slamming the door shut, locking it, bolting every latch. I could feel the walls closing in, shadows pressing against the windows. He's here, I choked out, my voice shaking. X, he's watching us. He's hunting us. Delilah's face crumpled, fear flooding her eyes. What are you talking about? Who's X? I turned to her, my hands trembling. The one who was texting Aiden. The one who called him to the tree that night. X isn't a person, D. It's a threat. It's a warning. Her eyes widened, her lips quivering. Are you saying Aiden was murdered? I nodded, my chest tightening. He was being stalked. He was afraid, paranoid. That's why he was so distant. He was protecting you. Her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. No, he can't be. Ezra, this can't be real. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. It's real. And now they're after us. I found their hideout, D. They were watching all of us. There were pictures, hundreds of them. I swallowed, my voice breaking. There was a photo of you? With a red X over your face? Her face went white, her body trembling. Oh God, they're going to kill me. Just like they killed him. A loud bang shattered the air. We both jumped, turning to the window. A rock crashed. Through the glass, landing on the floor. I moved quickly, pulling Delilah behind me, my heart racing. There was a note tied to the rock, scrawled in red ink. Game over. My blood ran cold. I scanned the street looking for the figure from before. But there was nothing. Just darkness. Silence. Delilah clung to me, her nails digging into my arm. We need to get out of here now. I nodded, grabbing her hand. We ran out the back door into the night. I led her through the woods behind her house, stumbling over roots and branches. The air was cold, biting. the shadows stretching long and menacing. We didn't stop until we reached the clearing. The tree loomed above us, skeletal and haunting. The same tree where Aiden died. Delilah froze, her eyes wide, her body trembling. "Why did you bring us here?" I looked around, panic setting in. I don't know. I ran. I wasn't thinking. A low laugh echoed through the air, cold and hollow. We spun around, our eyes wide, searching for the source. A figure stepped out from behind the tree, their face hidden in the shadows. I felt Delilah's grip tighten, her body pressed against mine. The figure moved closer, the moonlight finally revealing their face. My blood ran cold. Coach Fletcher. He smiled, a cruel, twisted smile that made my skin crawl. "You always were a smart kid, Ezra. Just not smart enough." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It didn't make sense. Why? Why did you kill him? Coach's eyes darkened, his face contorting with rage. Because he was a liar. A manipulative little liar, just like his father. Delilah's face crumpled, tears streaming down her face. You killed Aiden. You were X?" He laughed again, his voice dripping with malice. "X isn't a person. It's a promise. A promise that no one gets away with betrayal." I felt sick, my head spinning. "What are you talking about? Aiden never betrayed you." Coach's face twisted with hatred. "Oh, but he did. He found out the truth about me, about his father, about all the money we were stealing from the school's fund. He was going to expose us, ruin everything. I couldn't let that happen." Delilah's body shook with sobs. "You killed him. To protect your secret?" Coach's face hardened. "I did what I had to do, and now I have to do it again." He pulled a gun from his coat, aiming it at us. "Can't have any loose ends now, can I?" Panic surged through me, adrenaline flooding my veins. I pulled Delilah behind me, my eyes locked on the gun. "You won't get away with this. They'll find out. They'll know it was you." Coach smiled, his eyes cold. "No, they won't. You were obsessed, Ezra. You couldn't let go. You went crazy. Dragged Delilah out here and killed her. Then you killed yourself out of guilt. Tragic, really." I felt my blood freeze. He was going to frame me, just like he framed Aiden. He pulled the trigger. I moved on instinct, shoving Delilah out of the way as the bullet whizzed past us, hitting the tree. I grabbed a rock, throwing it at him, hitting his arm. The gun flew out of his hand, landing a few feet away. "Run!" I screamed, pushing Delilah towards the woods. She hesitated, tears in her eyes, but I shoved her. "Go!" She took off, her figure disappearing into the darkness. Coach roared, lunging at me, his hands wrapping around my throat. I choked, gasping for air, my vision blurring. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes wild. "You ruined everything!" he screamed, his grip tightening. I was supposed to be the hero. I was supposed to be the one everyone respected. I clawed at his hands, my lungs burning, my strength fading. I could see Aiden's face, hear his voice, feel his pain. I wouldn't let Coach get away with this. Not again. I gathered every ounce of strength left, bringing my knee up, slamming it into his stomach. He grunted, his grip loosening. I shoved him off, crawling towards the gun. He grabbed my leg, pulling me back. I kicked him, scrambling forward, my fingers grazing the gun. I grabbed it, spinning around, aiming it at him. He froze, his eyes wide, fear flickering across his face. "It's over, Coach." My voice was steady, cold. "You won't hurt anyone else." His face twisted with rage. "You don't have the guts, Ezra. You're just a scared little boy." I pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the night, ringing in my ears. Coach's body went limp, crumpling to the ground, his eyes staring up at the sky. Lifeless. Empty. I dropped the gun, my hands shaking, my body collapsing against the tree. It was over. Aiden was avenged. But the nightmare was far from over. The sun was rising when the police arrived, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It felt surreal, like the world was mocking me with its beauty, oblivious to the blood on my hands. Delilah stood beside me, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She hadn't spoken since we made the call, her body trembling, her fingers gripping the pendant around her neck so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was over, that she was safe. But the words wouldn't. I didn't know if they were true. Detective Milo Gaines approached, his face grim as he looked down at Coach Fletcher's body. The man who was once a hero, a mentor, now just another lifeless shell. His eyes flicked to me, calculating, assessing. "You did this?" he asked, his voice steady, controlled. I swallowed, my throat dry. He was going to kill us. He confessed. He admitted to killing Aiden. Detective Gaines's eyes softened, just a fraction. "We'll need your statement, both of you." Delilah flinched, her body curling inward, her voice barely a whisper. He was going to kill us just like he killed Aiden. He was going to make it look like we did it to ourselves. Gaines's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. "Bastard." He looked at me, his gaze firm. "You did the right thing, Ezra. You protected yourselves, protected her." I wanted to believe him. But when I looked at Coach's lifeless eyes, all I felt was cold. They took us to the station, kept us in separate rooms. I told them everything, about the messages, the stalking, the photos in the abandoned theater, about Coach's confession, about the fight, about the gun, about Aiden's final call. Detective Gaines listened, his face unreadable, his pen scratching against his notepad. When I finished, he leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You expect me to believe Aiden called you after he died?" I looked away, shame burning my cheeks. "I know how it sounds. But it happened. I heard his voice." Gaines sighed, rubbing his face. "Grief does things to people, kid. Makes them see things, hear things. I don't doubt you believe it, but—" I shook my head, anger surging. "I'm not crazy. He called me. He warned me. He knew Coach killed him." Gaines watched me for a long moment before nodding, closing his notebook. "We'll look into it." But I could tell he didn't believe me. They let me go later that afternoon. Delilah's parents picked her up, her face blank, her body moving mechanically. She didn't look back. I walked home alone, the sky gray, heavy with rain. My house was empty, cold. I went to my room, collapsing on my bed, exhaustion pulling me under. I dreamed of Aiden, of the tree, of the noose, of his eyes, lifeless, accusing. I woke up gasping, sweat-soaked, tears streaming down my face. I looked at my phone, half expecting another message, but the screen was blank. I tossed it aside, burying my face in my hands. It was over. Coach was dead, X was gone, Aiden was avenged. Then why did it feel like nothing was resolved? A soft knock at my door startled me. I looked up to see my mom, her face etched with worry. "Ezra, someone's here to see you." I frowned, confused. "Who?" She hesitated, her eyes shifting. "It's Delilah." My heart skipped. I got up, following her downstairs. Delilah stood by the door, her face pale, her eyes wide and haunted. She looked at me, her lips trembling. I need to show you something." I nodded, grabbing my jacket, following her outside. We walked in silence, the sky darkening, rain beginning to fall. She led me to the cemetery, to Aiden's grave. My stomach twisted, dread pooling in my gut. Delilah stopped in front of the headstone, her hands shaking. "I came here to say goodbye, to get closure." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "But I found this." She pointed. At the ground, I followed her gaze, my heart freezing. There, lying at the base of the headstone, was a phone. Aiden's phone. I stumbled back, horror flooding me. That's impossible. The police took it as evidence." Delilah looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "It was here, Ezra. Just lying here, and there's a message on it." I felt sick, my blood turning to ice. "A message from who?" She handed me the phone, her hand shaking. I looked at the screen, my vision blurring as I read the words. "Miss me?" The air turned cold, the world spinning around me. I looked up at Delilah, my voice cracking. This isn't possible." She shook her head, tears spilling over. "Who's doing this, Ezra? Who's messing with us?" I looked down at the phone, at the message taunting me from beyond the grave. And then the screen flickered, the background changing. It was a photo of Aiden. But not just any photo. It was from the night he died. Standing under the tree, staring at the camera, his face pale, his eyes hollow. And behind him, a figure. A shadowy figure, watching him, their face obscured. My breath caught, my hands trembling. Aiden wasn't alone that night. Someone was there, someone who wasn't Coach Fletcher. I looked at Delilah, my heart pounding. There's someone else, someone who's still out there. Her eyes widened, her face paling. But Coach admitted to it. He said he killed Aiden. I shook my head, fear tightening around my chest. He lied. He was protecting someone. Someone who's still playing this game. The phone buzzed, another message popping up. Round 2 starts now. The wind howled through the cemetery, cold and merciless, the rain falling harder. I looked at Aiden's grave, at the shadows stretching, long and dark, my chest tightening. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning.